How's it going, everybody? Today I'm going to be showing you how to remove a Cannondale hologram crankset from your bike. Now, as many of you know, if you ride Cannondale stuff, Cannondale loves to make proprietary tools and things just to make things a little bit harder for us as bike mechanics. So you will need a special tool. It is called the Cannondale KT-013 tool. Now, Cannondale sells this for a ridiculous $40. It's really just 2 bolts, but luckily for us, there are plenty of sellers on eBay, various other sites actually. A lot of different sites have a sort of aftermarket or non-brand version of this. I imagine they're really just the same thing or made even in the same place. It's really just 2 bolts that you use to remove the crankset. The Cannondale one, like I said, is about 40 bucks. These you can find for about $13 to $20, depending on where you find them. I have one of these sort of no-name ones and they work well. It worked perfectly fine for me. So you're gonna need one of these. You're also gonna need some hex keys. You're gonna need an 8mm as well as a 10mm. Now with these simple tools, we'll be able to remove our Cannondale cranksets from the bike. You may want to do this for a few reasons. If you're replacing your chain rings with something a little bit different, if you want to service your bottom bracket, or if you want to replace your entire crankset with something else, you'll need to remove the crankset from the bike. I hope this video is helpful. If it is, please consider dropping me a like or a subscribe. I'd appreciate it very much. Let's go ahead and get into the process. All right, so first thing we need to do is we need to remove this lock ring, or whatever you want to call it, this fixing bolt. This uses a 10mm, and now this might be on pretty tight. The torque spec is 30 foot-pounds, and so if your sort of standard hex is a little too short, this one seems to work for me, you may want to try to find something a little longer, or maybe go for a breaker bar with a hex bit on there. So we're just gonna go ahead and take this off. And this is gonna be a pretty long bolt, and so it actually may be a good idea to use a ratchet once you get a little bit of it loosened. And here we go. Make sure not to lose this little washer. You cannot buy replacement ones from Cannondale. You have to buy the whole bolt assembly, and it comes in a pack of 2, obviously. So just make sure you don't lose this little washer, very thin. Now we can go ahead and use our Cannondale KT-013 tool. Now this is not the tool that Cannondale sells. There's a bunch of sellers on eBay, Amazon that sell them. They're essentially just 2 bolts, and as long as they're machined well, it's not gonna be an issue. Now, I did actually modify this one a little bit, as you may see here. So what I had to do was I had to essentially cut 2 parallel grooves into here to essentially turn this into a thread chaser, because the threads on my bottom bracket were just completely destroyed, and I couldn't actually get the tool in there. I was considering going to find an actual thread restorer, but I figured I'd try this first. Worst case, I'd be out this tool, and this was, again, a cheaper one, not the actual Cannondale one, and it ended up working really well for me. So if you're having a hard time getting that fixing bolt off, and you have a hard time putting this in, it may just be that these threads are a little damaged. This crankset has a power meter on it, so I imagine the previous owner installed took off and reinstalled the arm, and they must have just done it wrong, or maybe cross-threaded it or something when they put it on, because it was really hard to get off the fixing bolt the first time I took it off, and it was impossible to get this in. So I ended up sort of clearing out the threads really slowly and carefully. I do have a whole video on how to clean out bicycle threads by making a sort of makeshift thread chaser like this one. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and check that video out. But now that I cleaned up the threads, it works just fine. So the Cannondale tool works like this. You have this inner sort of bolt right here, which screws in, and then you screw this one on the outside onto the crank arm itself, and then when you loosen the inner one, it'll pull the whole thing out. So this threads into the bottom bracket, this little one, and then the big one threads into the actual crank arm. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So this inner bolt is gonna use an 8mm, and I like to use this long-handled Park Tool one because it makes it just a little bit easier to get it in. So you gotta sort of find the threads, and then it should thread in there pretty easily. We want to thread this in actually pretty deep because we need enough space to thread on the other one. And so we're gonna go ahead and just get it in there. Again, once you get it started, using a ratchet might make your life a little bit easier. And we just want to go until the threads on the crank arm are fully visible. All right, that looks good to me. We have plenty of threads here. Now we're going to go ahead and take this one, and we're just going to thread it onto the crank arm like so. And it goes without saying, you should definitely lubricate the threads before you put this in. I just did this a minute ago off camera, just make sure it worked, and I already lubricated the threads. But make sure you put some grease or something on the threads of both pieces to make sure you don't actually strip out or screw up your threads further on both the bottom bracket and the crank arm. An adjustable works well to get this on. You don't need to go super tight, just make sure it's snug and bottomed out against the threads. Then we take our 8mm again, and we go through the hole here until we find the first bolt that we put in there, and then all you gotta do is just unscrew it. And then once you feel the tension release, it should actually be pretty easy. You just keep unscrewing, and there goes your crank arm. Oops. Here we go. Nice and easy, pretty simple. Once you have the crank arm off, it's a good idea to first inspect everything, make sure that there's nothing damaged, right? Make sure you have a good amount of grease on the outside here as well as on the inside threads. Make sure you keep track of which direction your spacers go or how many spacers you have. And then once you're ready to reinstall, all you gotta do is remove the tool. It's always a good idea to re-grease threads whenever you remove something. So I'm just gonna give these a little coating of grease. Then making sure our spacers are in the correct orientation and that our cranksets are opposite each other, or crank arms are opposite each other. We're just gonna go ahead and put this bolt back on. And this guy gets torqued down to 30 foot-pounds or 40 Newton meters. Make sure it's threading in smoothly. If you feel any resistance, stop, take it out, make sure that you're not cross-threading. And again, if those threads are a little gunked up, then you really need to look at some sort of thread chasing solution because you don't want to force this in there. And there we go. Cannondale hologram crankset removed and installed, nice and easy. I hope this video was helpful to some of you. Please drop me a like down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so yet. Stay tuned for more how-to build series videos and reviews. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.